Mayan Yisroel of Brooklyn, and theyeshiva.net.
Good evening, everybody. Bruchim Habayim. So the way it is in Torah is that in a small detail, in a tiny prat, you have embodied the whole klal. In other words, the greatest principles and ideas you don't only see when a great principle is articulated, but sometimes even in a nuance, in a prat, in a specific, particular, nuanced halacha, you can glean insight into the general theme of the concept. So I'm going to begin tonight with what would seem a particular specific halacha of Chanukah, and yet upon deeper reflection, it embodies, it captures part of the very essence of the Yom Tov that we're about to celebrate. So the sugya of Chanukah is in the second perek of Masechta Shabbos, perek b'mem madlikin, on Daf Chaf Aleph. The Gemara there brings three shittas about the oil and wicks that may be or not be used for Chanukah. There's the opinion of Reb Huna, Reb Chizda, and Reb Zayda in the name of Rav. The beginning of b'mem madlikin, the Mishnah and the Gemara discuss at length which oils and which wicks may be used for lighting Shabbos candles or may not be used for Shabbos candles. The general principle is that if it's not going to create a steady, consistent, reliable, sturdy flame, it should not be used for Shabbos because of the famous Gzeira of Shemayata. The person might want to read or learn or study by the light of the candle. It's before Edison's days, and if it's not a good, sturdy flame, he may come to move around the near the lamp, the flame, which can cause either mavir or mechaba, either increase the flame or extinguish the flame, which are all isurim min haTorah from the Avos Malachas. The question is, what about Chanukah? What about Chanukah? So Reb Huna says that all the wicks and oils that you're not allowed to use for Shabbos, you're not allowed to use for Chanukah either. Not Chanukah in the middle of the weekdays, and not Chanukah when it falls out on Shabbos. The reason for that is because according to Reb Huna, you're allowed to use Chanukah candles to read or to use for another reason. Mutter l'ishtamash la'ira. According to Reb Huna, you're allowed to use Chanukah candles for your own benefit. Number one. Number two, kafsa zakukla, which means, according to Reb Huna, when you light Chanukah candles and the candle is extinguished within the time that it has to burn, it's, for example, a half an hour, or for approximately a half an hour after nightfall. So kafsa, if the flame is extinguished within that time, zakukla, you're obligated to rekindle it. So Reb Huna is worried that if you're not going to be using a good wick or good quality oil, what's going to happen? It might be extinguished after 10 or 15 minutes, or after 3 minutes, or after 60 seconds. You already started to drink your tea in honor of Chanukah. Afterwards, you say, I'm hungry, so let me go eat something. And you forget, or you're negligent, and you don't rekindle the menorah, and you weren't yotze the mitzvah. If it's Shabbos, there's a chashash also shemayata. Shemayata means you want to read it, and it's not a sturdy flame, you may play with it. So that's why Reb Huna says the same caution that we say about Shabbos exists by Chanukah. Then there's a second opinion of Reb Chizda. Reb Chizda's opinion is what? That Shabbos you do have to be cautious, but not in the middle of the week. Why? So the Gemara explains, because according to Reb Chizda, he holds kafsa ein zakukla, which means once it's lit, you don't have to rekindle it. In the expression in Shulchan Aruch in Hilchos Chanukah, hadlaka oisa mitzvah, you put it on, you kindled it, you did a mitzvah. So therefore, middle of the week, I don't care what type of wick or oil you used. Even if it's not good, then it's going to become extinguished. Okay, ein zakakla. But you're allowed to use the flame, so therefore there's still the problem of shemayata. In the middle of the week, I don't care, so ein shemayata. You're allowed to move your candle in the middle of the week. On Shabbos, I have a problem. That's Reb Chizda's opinion. Then the Gemara cites the third opinion on Daf Chafalaf Amid Beis, the opinion of Reb Zayd in the name of Rav, that for Chanukah, not in the weekdays and not on Shabbos, do you have to worry about oil or wicks. Any oil or any wick that burns, despite the fact that on Shabbos, on Friday, we don't want you to use it, on Chanukah, it's not a problem. Madlikin behen b'Chanukah, psilus or shmane madlikin behen b'Chanukah, bein b'choil, bein b'Shabbos, Chanukah in the weekdays, Chanukah Friday afternoon. Why? Number one, asur l'ishtamish la'oira. You're not allowed to use the Chanukah candles for reading or for any other personal benefit, as we say in Haneris Halalu. Haneris Halalu. Asur l'ishtamish ben ela l'roisim bilvad. So therefore, there's no issue of shemayat on Shabbos. You're not going to move around the flame because you want to increase it, you want to enhance it because there's no benefit of it. You can't read anyhow. As far as the issue of kafsa, kafsa ein zakukla. If it gets extinguished, you're not mechuyev to rekindle it. So therefore, even if you're negligent or you forget, it's fine. So that's why Reb Zayda said in the name of Rav, whether it's Yom Tif, whether it's weekdays or Shabbos, it's not an issue. You're yoitze, it's fine to use the Ner Chanukah. The Chazal allowed you any wick and any oil. Then the Gemara continues that the rabbi said over this din to Abaye in the name of Rav, in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah, this explanation, and Abaye did not accept it. Loi kibla, Abaye did not accept it. In the words of the Gemara, Amru Rabbana Kamed Abaye Mishmeid Rabbi Yirmiyah v'loi kibla. They told this over to Abaye in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah. What did they tell over? The explanation behind the halacha of Rav. That what's the explanation behind the halacha of Rav? The explanation is kafsa, ein zakakla, v'asur l'ishtamash lo'ira. He would not accept it. When Rabbin came, they said it over in front of Abaye Mishmeid Rabbi Yochanan, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. When they said it over in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, v'kibla, Abaye accepted it. And then Abaye said something quite interesting. If I would have had a schus, if I would have been worthy, I would have accepted, I would have acquired this teaching of Rav earlier. Because initially when they explained to him this opinion of Rav, he did not accept it. Loi kibla, when they said in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah. Only in the name of Rabbi Yochanan did he accept it. So he said later, if I would have been zoich, I would have accepted it earlier when I heard this. Frag the Gemara of Hagamra, what's the difference? He accepted it now. He learned it now. And for the Gemara, nafkamina, legirsa, the yankasa. The difference is in regard to the girsa, to the learning of one's youth. As Rashi puts it, girsa the yankasa, miskayim yoyse mishal zikna. The learning of one's yankasa, yunukah, of one's youth, endures far more, far deeper than what one learns at an elderly age. The brain is it's not that fertile, as some of us know. You can't compare it to the younger young to the young years. So therefore, Abaye regretted deeply the fact that he did not embrace this halacha when he was much younger, because even though he embraced it and he learned it, it could no more be girsa the yankasa, the study of one's youth. Stam derech agav, you see an interesting thing here. If you ask a regular person, what's already contained in this halacha that you have to be a young child to remember it? Even if somebody is 75 years old and they're sitting at this shir and the first time they heard kafsa ein zakukla. Okay, kafsa ein zakukla. Mutalish asalish tamish la'ira. It's a language, they say languages. A child could learn 11 languages. A child could learn the whole Tanakh far greater, far faster than we ever imagined. We confer some of our dumbness on our children. We think children are very, very absorbent. They're incredible brains that can absorb. But what's in this? It's a halacha. So Abaye is regretting, I didn't accept What is it? One line. It's a whole Masechta, a whole Seder. Abaye is saying this line. This line, Kavsa ein zakuk la'asel l'shtamish la'oira. If I would have been young, it would have been very different. It's a little difficult to understand, and Abaye had a good brain. So, this is a halacha, and that's the halacha in Shulchan Aruch. The halacha in Shulchan Aruch is like the third opinion, not like Reb Huna, not like Reb Chizda, but like Reb Zera Amar Rav, as Tosfos points out on the spot here in Daf Chaf Aleph. Abaye also accepted it ultimately, that the wicks and the shmanim, the wicks and the oils that we use for Shabbos, we do not have to be cautious when it comes to Chanukah. Psilas or shmanim shamru chachamim madlikin ben b'Shabbos, madlikin ben b'Chanukah, bein b'choil, bein b'Shabbos. So the Bnei Yissaschar asks a question. His question is, Hagufa kasha. What's taka de kavana? They instituted Neiris Chanukah for Pirsumei Nisa, to publicize the grand miracle that happened on Chanukah. As we say in Ala Nisim, why wouldn't the Chachamim institute that Kafsa Zakukla? If I light the candles and a few moments later it was extinguished, I should be mechuyev me'ikir hadin to relight it, because it's dark now. There's no candle. What would be the Havana? Taka like Reb Huna says. But Reb Chizda and Reb Zera argue, and the halacha is like the third opinion, and again the second opinion agrees with that as well. His only argument is about Shabbos, because mutar l'shtamish lo'ira. But most opinions is kafsa ein zakukla, and that's halacha l'maisa. True, the Pais can bring that if the flame did not burn for a half an hour after nightfall, if you can, it's better to rekindle it. True. But halacha l'maisa, me'ikar adin kafsa ein zakukla, you don't have to rekindle. So the Bnei Yissaschar asks in his Maimori Chotchei Kislev, Tevis Maimer Gimel Perek, Yud Aleph, Lama hekelu kol kach b'neir mitzvah halazah, ulu pirsumei nisa, yoiser hoyame haroyu l'sakein, she'yeh zakuk lachzer l'hadlika. Just for the din of pirsumei nisa, to publicize the miracle through the flame which has been extinguished. It has been kafsa. The Bnei Yissaschar gives two answers, two explanations. We're going to explore his two explanations and then take it one step further to discuss a third dimension. But first, what happened with Abaye? They said it over in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah, he didn't accept it. They said it over in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, he accepted it. If the logic is a logic, if the seichel is a seichel, accept it. Elamai, it didn't make sense to him. So just because they said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, he accepted it. We know by the Chazal, which is the general derech of Torah, if your mind says that this is unacceptable, that's how you paskin. That's the halacha you accept. A person must employ their mind according to Torah. It doesn't say that the logic was given over differently. It was just the name Rabbi Yirmiyah or Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yirmiyah not, Rabbi Yochanan yes. The first reason the Bnei Yissaschar gives for kafsa ein zakukla is based on the premise. The Gemara says in Masechta Shabbos, the same sugya, haragil b'neir havyele bonim talmidei chachamim neir mitzvah v'toira oir, that the neir of Chanukah reflects the oir haTorah, the light of Torah. Zok the Bnei Yissaschar, with this halacha of kafsa ein zakukla, Chazal tried to bring out the uniqueness of the study of Torah versus the study of any other wisdom or discipline in the world. He puts it beautifully. He says, Kol hachachmas sheba'olam, all the disciplines in the world, all the wisdoms of the world, k'sha'adam oisik behen, v'lo yechavin ha'inyan ha'amiti b'iyunai, yiskalkel ha'inyan ha'nirtza, v'yegias iyunai l'reik, v'adera b'kilkel ha'inyan v'hazman. Mashenkin b'chachmas haTorah ba'avasa tishge tamid afilu loikivinas ha'alacha kutshabrichu chade b'pulpula. All the wisdoms of the world, if you're studying something, you're reading something, and you don't get it, you misinterpret it, You misunderstood it. You explained it wrongly. It was purposeless. And at the end, you'll look at your time and you'll say, as he puts it, this was a waste of time. It was a waste of energy, a waste of resources. I stood in the laboratory for years, for months. I tried to figure it out. I thought I was on the right derech. I realized it was completely erroneous. You say, okay, maybe it's a good exercise in humility, halavai. But as far as the limud hachachma, it was worthless. In other words, I try to kindle a flame, and then the flame is extinguished, it doesn't endure. So then you say it was pointless. With Chachmas HaTorah, he says, Ba'avasa tish getamid. As the Yerushalmi says at the end of Brachas, Afilu pitetaya da'iraisa, patetaya da'iraisa tavin. Chatting of Torah, even if the person is learning, and they may be making mistakes, and ultimately they're not mechavan lahalacha, and it's a pilpul here, and they remain with a question. Or they come up with an answer which is then refuted. In other words, the flame is extinguished. Ein zakukla. That in itself is so powerful that even if you don't rekindle it, just the flame itself, for whatever it lasts, is a purpose in and of itself. It has tremendous, tremendous significance, holiness, power. And he says quite an interesting chiddush, that after the rule of Malchus Yavin over the Jewish people, Nisrabu hamachloikis upluktis b'halachas. In Bayis Rishon, we don't have arguments. Even in the beginning of Bayis Sheni, we have almost no arguments. When begin the eras of abundant debates and disputations and machloikisen among the Tanoim, among the Zugais, and later the Tanoim, and then the Amirayim, it's in Bayis Sheni, after the Tkufa of Chanukah. Achenes Chabru Sidri HaMishnayos bepluktus, HaTalmud bepluktus. The whole Mishnayos and Talmud is composed from argument. Argument is not only a part of it, it's indispensable of it. That's the whole halach. It's composed of machlokes. It's made up of machlokes. Ume'eis Hashem hoisazos lahodos ma ben chachmas haTorah lechachmas hachitzonius u'filosofia hayavonis. He says this was from God to demonstrate the difference between Greek philosophy and all other wisdoms in contrast to the wisdom of Torah. Shahatorah kol ha'hoigeba va'oisig ba'afilu lo'kiven as ha'alacha ye'ratze lifnei Hashem mashenkin b'shar ha'chachmas. In Torah, the very enmeshment in it, the very engagement in it, the very involvement in it, even though there's a debate. So only one person is going to be mechavan lahalacha. But as the Gemara says, Eilu veilu divrei Elokim chayim. There's still dveikus in Hashem. It's invaluable. It's extremely significant. Even though it's extinguished. Ein zakakla. The lighting of the candle, the lighting of the Ur HaTorah in one's life, even if it will prove not to endure because somebody else came and refuted, or you yourself came and refuted the idea, it's still a geder of limud HaTorah. As it says in Svarim, some places the Gemara says, for example, Hadir Reb Ashi b'dusahi. The Gemara will quote Reb Ashi and says what Reb Ashi said is b'dusa. B'dusa literally means, it's like, so to speak, literally like a sheker. It's not true. So if somebody just learned that piece of Reb Ashi, that the Gemara itself said b'dusa, do they have to make a birchas HaTorah or not? If you're just learning that piece of Gemara today, that's it. Do you have to say before a bracha, in which you say, Asher b'charbona mikol ha'amim, v'nasan lanu es Torah soy, his Torah, Baruch Hashem Nezan, which is Torah's emes. And the Gemara itself is going to say, Hadir Reb Ashi, b'dusahi, that it's not emes. So it's pashat l'maisa that you have to make a birchas HaTorah. Because it may not be emes legabe, a deeper truth. But nonetheless, every experience in limud HaTorah is truth in its own way. That's the first explanation of the Bnei Yissaschar. What's the remez of Kaf Sein Zakukla? Then he adds a more homiletical remez. Bnei Yissaschar says this. The Gemara says a story, Masechti Yevamos, Daf Tzadik Vav, that Rabbi Yochanan, who was the first generation of Amirayim of Eretz Yisrael, the composer, the editor of Talmud Yerushalmi, Rabbi Yochanan was upset at Rebbe Lazar that he did not give over a shmua, which he heard, a halacha, that he heard mipiv in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Why was he upset? Rabbi Yochanan told him that David HaMelech says in Perek Samachalef of Tilim, Agura ba'aholcha oilamim, I shall dwell in your tent, oilamim, plurally, in 2 worlds. So he said that when a Talmid Chacham passes away, im oimrim shmua mipiv svasav doivevois bekever. If his students or students of future generations say over halacha in his name, from his mouth, mipiv, so svasav doivevois bekever. His lips are moving in the kever, so Rabbi Yochanan is upset that Rabbi Lazar is not saying this shmu in his name. So the Bnei Yissaschar asks the question, why was it Rabbi Yochanan who was upset about this? And what's negeya so much to the Talmid Chacham that should have this experience of svas of daivavos bakever? So he answers that it's based on a Rabbi Yochanan somewhere else. The Gemara discusses in Shabbos, Daf Nun Ches and Daf Nun Tes, a situation of a bell mit a klapper, a zug and an inval as it's called. Usually the halacha is that for something to be mekabel tumah, to become ritually impure through a tumah, if it touches a mace, if it touches a sheret, etc., it has to be a keli, a utensil. What's the definition of a utensil? It's used, it's purposeful. It can be a jacket, it can be a shirt, it can be a hammer, it can be a bowl. A keli, something that, it's a utensil. A keli in halacha means something that has a benefit. It's used for something. So the Gemara says, what about a bell? A bell that's used to generate a sound. Yeah, that's also called a beneficial keli. And he learns it out from the pasuk. Pasuk is kol davar. His lashon is kol davar asher yavoi be'esh. Anything that's used in fire, so you have to cleanse it in fire. Kol davar could be read kol dibur, that even something that its whole somethingness is only a dibur, it only generates a sound, like a bell. You don't use a bell for any purpose, but for a dibur, to generate a voice, to generate a sound, a klapper. So that too is susceptible to Kabbalah's tumah. So the Gemara asks the question, what happens if the klapper is taken out of the bell? So you only have the bell itself, the dome, you don't have the inval inside of it. It's still mekabel tumah. Why? Lamai chazi. It broke. A keli that's broken, that's not usable anymore. For example, if you have a keli in which you have liquid and there's a big hole, you can't use it anymore. It's not mekabel tumah anymore because it loses the status of a beneficial utensil. You don't have the inval, you don't have the klapper. What are you going to do with it? Lamai chazi. So it's a whole shak levatari in the Gemara. And later, Daf Nun Tes, the Gemara concludes ultimately in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. First he says it in somebody else's name, and then Epoch. At the end it's in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says that it's still good for something. What is it good? Royu lahakishoy al gabe klei cheres. You could take the bell itself, go to an earthenware vessel, and clap it on the earthenware vessel. Itaka doesn't have an internal mechanism to generate sound, to generate a sound, but you can clap it, you can bang it on a klei cheres. So Rashi says, "Umashmiya kol kibatchila v'loy batalei mimelachte harishayna." Its original purpose is not completely obliterated, because even though on its own it can do it, but with the assistance of another keli, of a klei cheres, it can generate that sound. So therefore it still retains the same status, legabe tumah and tara, and therefore it's mekabel tumah. That's what Rabbi Yochanan says. What do we see from this, says the Bnei Yissaschar? That even a utensil, which you cannot use anymore for the original malacha that you always used it for, but if by combining it with another keli, you could still do what you did with the original malacha, it's still called a keli. Says the Bnei Yissaschar in his classic style, a Talmid Chacham who learned Torah throughout his life, or any Jew who learned Torah throughout his life in this world, it's always a combination of 2 dimensions. There's the neshama, there's the soul, and then there's the body. And the definition of avodah in this world, hayoim la'asoisam u'lemachar lekabel scharam, is always the synthesis between a neshama and a guf. When the neshama leaves this body and goes to Gan Eden, even though the neshama continues to learn Torah and perhaps learn even more Torah, nonetheless you can't call it hayoim la'asoisam, because asiyah is not called asiyah only through the keli of the neshama, which is the guf. So therefore the greatness of learning Torah, the schar of learning Torah, the benefits of learning Torah, that's primarily in this world, where you have the neshama in a guf. In Gan Eden, it's already a whole different cheshbon. It's considered schar. It's nenem iziv hashchina. The real avodah of Torah and mitzvahs is in this world, the neshama in the guf. That's why the pasuk defines that in this world, the Jew is called a mahalech, and in the next world, it's called an oimed. Mahalech means real movement, real growth is possible only in this world when we're in the body, despite the challenges or because of the challenges of this shidduch between the neshama and body, which we discussed in previous shiurim at length. Where in Olam Haba, it's just the pure neshama itself, it's considered an oimed. B'med varim amurim, he says, when you're learning Torah on your own in Olam Haba, b'shas there are Talmidim students who are living in this world, neshama beguf, and they're saying over Torah in the name of the Rebbe. So he says, so what happens is, Svasav, Sifsoisav, Doivavois Bakever. His lips are moving in the caver. So he says, what happens is, Nimtzuhu, Loimid Bekli Haguf Ba'olam Haza Kamay B'chayav. So he's learning with the keli, with the vessel of his guf in this world, like in this day. Hagam Shoayidei Davar Acher, Mikri Oisem Ein Melachta Rishayna. Even though it's through a different mechanism, it's not like when he was alive, he himself was generating this of David voice. Now it's not he himself, because he is in Olam Haba, but his Talmidim, as a result of his Talmidim, of David voice B'kever. So this is similar to the bell and the clapper, even though the bell itself doesn't have the mechanism to generate its own sound. You're using another keli. Nonetheless, it's still called a functioning keli as before, and it's makabel tumah. That's what Rabbi Yochanan says. So therefore, Rabbi Yochanan told Rabbi Lazar, you have to say your shmua mipiv, because as a result of this, it's considered that the tzaddik is using his keli, he's learning a neshama with his guf. He himself can do it. It's through the other keli, it's through the body of his talmidim. That's still called me'ein melachta rishoyna. He's still doing me'ein melachta rishoyna through another keli. So therefore, it's the same status. So it has the whole mile of limud atayr and neshama beguf, like in this world with all the benefits and all the rewards. And therefore, even after his passing, he's called a mahalech, which is what the Navi says in Zechariah, v'nasati lecha mahalchim bein ha'oimdim ha'ela, grad in the haftarah of Chanukah, v'nasati lecha mahalchim bein ha'oimdim ha'ela. This is the psak of Rabbi Yochanan in the Masechta Shabbos, that even though the klapper was taken away, since you can klap it on a klei cheres, oise me'ein melachta de davar acher mikra keli. So that's why Reb David HaMelech said, agura ba'ol cha'olamim, and Rabbi Yochanan was makbid when Rabbi Lazar did not say a shmua, says the Bnei Yissaschar. That's kafsa. When the flame is extinguished, meaning when the fire of life is extinguished and the soul passes on, and the life of the body is extinguished, that's called kafsa. And the soul goes back to its own part. So he says, Neir Chanukah, which is Roimaz on Milas HaTorah, so kafsa ein zakukla. Don't think once it got extinguished, there's no limud, there's no mile of limud HaTorah anymore, even though the flame of this person was extinguished. But the fact that his Talmidim continued to learn Torah and Sifsais of Doivavois, just like he was alive, so just like when it was burning, obviously it has the whole mile of his Limud Torah, even after his passing. Ein Zakukla. Don't think the Ner Chanukah is over, there's no Torah by this person. It still continues. At Kan, the two explanations of the Bnei Yissaschar, what's the remez in Chanukah, Kafsa, Ein Zakukla. I once saw a word, very geschmack. Abaya, when he heard Kafsa Ein Zakukla, he heard the shit of Rav, that you could use any wick and oil for Chanukah, even if you can't use it for Shabbos. Why? Because even if the flame is extinguished, you don't have to rekindle. When Abaya heard it in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah, he couldn't deal with it. Why? It's Pirsumei Nisa. Why would they make such a din of Ein Zakukla? What would be the svara? You want a candle to burn, let it burn. If it's not burning, tell him to rekindle it. What's the svara? When he heard it in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yochanan, who says in Masechta Yevamos to Rebbe Lezer Sifsais of Doivavois Bekever, so he understood the oimek of the halacha of Kafsa Ein Zakukla. So that's when Abaya was makabelit. He understood what's behind it, that this is a general idea concerning the Oir HaTorah, how the Chazal viewed the light of Torah. In order to understand this even deeper, clearer, and take it to the next level, so let's be makdim. The nusach of Chazal, as you know, was extremely precise and meticulous. The nusach they made for Chanukah is the tefillah of Al Hanisim. As the Gemara says in Shabbos, also Daf Chaf Aleph, that Lashon Acheres Kavim Asam Yom Tovim B'Halal u'B'Hidah. So Halal is what? Halal from Tehillim, and Hidah, as Rashi says, is the nusach of Al Hanisim, which we say in davening and in benching in Birchas Hamazon during Chanukah. In Al Hanisim, so it begins by May Yochanan Kohen Gadol, by May Matisyahu ben Yochanan Kohen Gadol, Chashmonah Yavanav, Kshamda Malchus Yavan Harishal Amcha Yisrael, and then we describe what the objective of Malchus Yavan Harishal was, of the evil Greek Empire. Kshamda Malchus Yavan Harishal Amcha Yisrael, lahashkicham Torasecha, ulahaviram mechukei ritzonecha. To make them, the Jewish people, forget your Torah, and to take them away, lahaviram, to remove them, mechukei ritzonecha, from the chukim, from the decrees of your will. And then he continues, was their objective. Va'ata, b'rachamecha rab, mamadat alehem beis tzarasam, etc. Why did the Chazal choose these words? Lahashkicham Torasecha, ulahaviram mechukei ritzonecha. They could have said it clearly and much more bekitzer. Lahashkicham haTorah, ulahaviram hamitzvos. Why the diuk lahashkicham Torasecha instead of haTorah, and not mitzvahs, but rather chukei ritzonecha? So Chassidus explains, and this is a great, an important, central theme in Chassidus about Chanukah, that there is a diuk here. Not la'ashkicham as haTorah, and not la'aviram of the mitzvahs, but la'ashkicham Torasecha, u'la'aviram mechukei ritzonecha. What perturbed them was not Torah, but Torasecha. And what perturbed them was not mitzvahs, but rather chukei ritzonecha. What's the issue here? What's the diuk here? The Greeks and the Greek Empire embraced philosophy, logic, aesthetics. They were obsessed with human development, human perfection. They were obsessed with the arts. They were into history and philosophy and biology. This was not a nation of ignorant barbarians. On the contrary, the reason that there was such an appeal by the Jewish people for the Yevonim and for what the Yevonim represented was Yaft Elikim Liyefes V'yishkoin Ba'ahal Le'shem. As the Gemara says, Yaft Elikim Liyefes is Malchus Yavan, because of their sensitivities to aesthetics, to beauty, to Shleimus Ha'adam. Greek philosophy introduced tremendous enlightenment into civilization. Their new emphasis on tragedies, plays, writings, history, logic, etc., all the Chachmas Yavan, all of its branches, sports, Olympics, athleticism, were very grand, were very enticing, were very interesting, were very engaging. Therefore, they can appreciate culture, they can appreciate a philosophy, they can appreciate a wisdom. Torah as a chachma, Torah as a philosophy, Torah as another culture that has its depth, its rules of logic, its perspectives. This did not perturb them. This did not bother them so much. The same is true with mitzvahs. Mitzvahs has different parts. We know there are mishpatim, there are edis, there are chukim. Mishpatim are logical mitzvahs on which every wholesome civilization is based. What Hillel says, "Ma'dalach sani lechavrach lo yisavit," what you dislike to be done to you, don't do to anybody else, is a basic tenet of a moral civilization. Even I think even most atheists would agree that if you want some definition of morality on some level, that makes a lot of sense. What you dislike to be done to you, don't do to anybody else. It's a mitzvah. But this is a mitzvah that completely suits logic. I mean, obviously, you can argue everything. The mind is capable of arguing and refuting everything. And you can ask, how long will it endure? But nonetheless, this is a mitzvah that makes sense. You even have edus. Edus are testimonials, maybe not logical mitzvahs like loy sirtzach and loy signev and loy sinaf, etc. Midvar sheketirchak. But edus are testimonials. Every nation has its culture and its holidays and its symbolisms and its significance to inculcate various ideas in a person's life. The idea of gratitude, the idea of grace, the idea of unity. There's edus. What perturbed the Yevonim was lahashkicham toirasecha ulahaviram mechukei ritzaynecha. The element in Torah, not the logic of Torah, but it's toirasecha. And the element of mitzvahs, that it's chukei ritzaynecha, the chukim, what we call super rational laws. And yet, if that's the case, it should have said ulahaviram mechukecha. No, he says ulahaviram mechukei ritzaynecha. He adds the word ritzaynecha, because even with chukim, you can rationalize it. If I have a teacher, a mentor, who has proven his brilliance over and over again, has given me advice for living, has given me a manual and a blueprint for living that has worked effectively for many years and has been extremely productive and beneficial. And one day, he gives me an instruction and he tells me to do something. And I say, till now, I understood. I understood it in one level or another level. But now, I don't understand it. So he says, do it. Is it logical to do it or is it illogical to do it? Obviously, it's logical to do it. When somebody has a track record, and you know their dazzling brilliance, and you know that everything makes sense, and you know that everything they told you was beneficial and instrumental for your growth and productivity, so the fact that you don't understand the reason should not hinder you from engaging in it. Because you could say, you know what? Maybe I don't understand today, I'll understand tomorrow. Maybe not tomorrow, in 5 years. Maybe in 20 years. Even theoretically, if I can't understand it, okay, my brain may not fathom it, but his brain fathoms it. So even a chayk, I say, I don't understand it. In my seichel, I don't understand it. But in his seichel, it makes sense. It makes sense. So to grow in life, I have to have the humility that if I'm going to wrap my brain about every single detail, I won't be able to do anything. I mean, our life is based on this. When a physician or your doctor gives you a prescription, right? I think most of us don't go to the pharmacist, and before we take the prescription, we study exactly what this pill is made up of in order to understand how it's going to heal the infection. If you'll ask your doctor, as I once did, he said, go to 12 years medical school like I did, and then you'll understand. So you have to have a certain trust in the doctor, and it's good to remember that Tov Sheberoifim, etc. But there's a certain trust because I know the doctor, I know who he is, I know his background, I know he helped me in the past. So I appreciate that even if this is not a rational thing to me, or it may even be completely irrational, nonetheless, Seichel tells me that I can't always wait for my Seichel to fully agree with everything because I'm not going to get anywhere. A person has a personal trainer, for example. This is Ma'aseh B'Choyim. Sometimes they tell a person to do something again and again and again, and they don't see the benefit. But you trust a man who has 20, 30 years of experience training hundreds or thousands of people, that even if you may not wrap your brain around this move or the significance of this repetition or this exercise, it makes sense to somebody somewhere in someone's logic, even if it's not in my logic. And that the Yevonim can agree with. Even that the Yevonim can agree with. The chayk, as embracing it, even though it's not logical to me, but knowing that there is logic somewhere, it may not be my logic, it may be the logic of the Jewish God who is above them, they can accept. What really bothered them was, lahaviram mechukei ritzoynecha. Not mechukecha, but chukei ritzoynecha. That the significance of the chayk is that it's ritzoynecha. It's your will. It's your will. It's not about seichel. And let's explain what this means. So the best way to explain it is a mashal, a very geschmacka mashal that Hasidim used to say to bring out this point. It's one of those chelam, meshalim, or stories. Vayhi hayoim, some of the chachmei chelam heard frightening news. What's the frightening news? All the balei agolos, all the coachmen who have been supporting their families with dignity for generations, taking people, transporting them from one city to another city, from one place to another place, via the horse and the buggy, the coach. Their parnasa is about to be obliterated, lo'ilam v'at. Why? A new monster emerged on the planet. This monster apparently can schlep dozens and dozens of big iron wagons. This guy in the front, this monster in the front, eats lots of coal, spews lots of smoke, drives 3 or 4 or 5 times faster than the fastest horse, can schlep who knows how many people, hundreds of people simultaneously, and suddenly throughout the street, throughout the cities and forests of Russia and Poland and the other countries in Eastern Europe, they're spreading out iron tracks everywhere, and these monstrous wagons will be on them, and they're calling them trains, headed by a locomotive, is about to be obliterated. For them, this was a big, big psura ra, quite negative news. What will be? So they have a big asifa, and they decide that they have to go check out the matzav. They have to check out the matzav. On the way, the Rosh HaChachamim says, let me tell you the strategy. We know what really happened. There's no way that you're schlepping hundreds of wagons or dozens of wagons, of cars, without a horse. Elamai, the inventor of this train, is a real ganav. He took the horse and he hid it somewhere. He hid it somewhere in the first wagon, in the first wagon. And we will expose the fraud, that this is basically a horse. And so we will restore dignity to our livelihood. It's a horse, it's a ferd that schleps everything and nothing else. So they come to the big city, Moscow, where there's going to be a big show of this train on this special day. They make sure to come early. And the night before, the day when it's going to display its powers, all night they're searching the train for the mysterious horse. They look here and they look there and they look here and they look there. Hayela deinenu, bayira bayimotse, they don't see a horse. In the morning, thousands of people come to watch the Mizmer Shir, the Chanukah Habayis of this train, and indeed, it starts squeaking and whistling, and the smoke goes out, and the coal gets eaten, and to gives a whistle, the Yaakov halach ladarka, it starts going. So they have an asifa again, and the Rosh HaChachamim says, Azag Ganav, this inventor, such a fraud. They say, what? What? He said, the guy managed to hide such a tiny little horse. A tiny horse he hid somewhere. And he put it there so that we can't see it, nobody could see it. And that's how he's schlepping it all. But it's a horse. Ad kan the mashal. Bringing out the point, of course, that it's very hard, almost impossible, to change their paradigms. In his mind, there's no way of transporting people or objects without a horse. The new concepts of what the Industrial Revolution accomplished were beyond his wildest imagination. So he's ready to lower his standards. It's not a large horse, it's a small horse. He didn't find a small horse either. So he says it's a tiny, what we would call today microscopic horse, but he probably didn't use that term, that's hidden somewhere that's schlepping it. But to say that there's no horse, that can't be. there has to be a horse. They tell a similar maisa, a little sharper of a maisa, that there was once a chassid who was in the home of a maskil. Maskilim were so-called very enlightened Jews, and this maskil was having a party in his house with his friends, and he started to speak about this chassid who was visiting, was a chassid of the Tzemach Tzedek. And he started to speak about the Tzemach Tzedek and other tzaddikim, and he said their only interest is money. They take kvitlach, all they want is money. And he went on laughing and making jokes. So they asked this chassid if he has anything to respond. He was staying there. So he tells this guy, yeah, you remind me of my grandmother's behema. My grandmother had a cow, and you mamash remind me of her. He says, why? He says, I'll tell you the maisa. My grandmother had a cow who she was very close with. They were like best friends. They had a special relationship for decades and decades. Well, today in America you have to be scared with words, but they had a close friendship for many, many years. And gewaldige connection. The cow served my grandmother was gracious to the cow. It was a gewaldige working relationship. Every Mitzvah Shabbos, when my baba would clean up the dishes from Shabbos, so she would clean the cholent pot and the kugel pot. And of course, at night, you give the cow water. Before it goes to sleep, it wants to be watered. So my baba would take the cholent pot filled with water and give that to the cow Mitzvah Shabbos for a drink. And the cow looked forward all week to that drink Mitzvah Shabbos, because it wasn't just regular water. It had all the grease and all the she'eris hapleita, all the leftover of the kugel and the cholent and the kugel and the chicken and all the kishka and everything. It had all the black pieces in the oil. The water was oily and greasy, and it was so geschmack. All week the behemoth looked forward for this drink. It was gewaldik. And once she got that drink, the tainug was like a tainug gan Eden by her. One week, it was Mitzvah Shabbos, shechali is b'Yom Tov. So my baba was busy in the kitchen preparing for Yom Tov. So she forgot about her minig, and she poured out the pot with the dirty water. But you have to water the behemoth before it goes to bed, before it goes to sleep. So she filled up regular, clean water from the well near our house, and she gave it to the behemoth. The behemoth hal cheshbon when is Mitzvah Shabbos. So the behemoth was looking forward for the greasy, oily geschmacka water, malava malka water. Suddenly the behemoth puts its head into the pail of water. Abrach, it's clean, fresh water. Behemoth starts drinking and starts thinking, what happened? What happened? And the behemoth doesn't understand. Every week, Mitzvah Shabbos, I get my water. What happened? The behemoth comes to a conclusion that probably she got jealous of me, and she decided she's taking the water for herself. And therefore, she didn't give me the water. And the behemoth starts thinking, what a disgusting, envious person. I serve her so faithfully and loyally for so many years. And yet, instead of having a little hakaras hatoiv, she's so obnoxious and so ungrateful. She steals my water for herself. And this chassid says, and since that day, this cow would not talk to my grandmother anymore. She severed her friendship with my grandmother and became her sworn enemy till the day of her death. He looked at him and he said, so you remind me of my grandmother's behemoth. In your life, there's nothing but an obsession with money. You can't even imagine that there are some people who don't have that life. You can't imagine. It's not your fault. That cow could not imagine that there's somebody who's not interested in putrid, dirty, kugel, cholent, and kishka water. She couldn't imagine it. In her imagination, this is her tainug. It must be everybody's tainug. It must be my baba's tainug too. And hence, if she didn't get it, my baba must have stolen it from her. But of course, that's a behemoth. That's a behemoth. That's what he told him. This is the yesod, the mashal, to understand the nekuda of the milchama, of the deep, deep milchama between the Yevonim and the Jewish people. It wasn't just an external milchama on the very external dimensions of Torah and mitzvahs. The nekuda was lahashkicham Torasecha ulahavira mechukei ritzeinecha. And let's explain this, because when we talk about the Yevonim and Chanukah, we're not talking about the Greeks of old. If it was the Greeks of old, we wouldn't be celebrating it today. Rabbi YY writes in Kedushas Levi, the Gemara says in Masechta Shabbos that after the miracle of Chanukah, L'shana haba, the next year they made it a Yom Tov. He says, why did they wait a year? Why didn't they do it right away? After the miracle of 8 days, the oil burning, they should have had an asifa and said, this is a Yom Tov. They waited a year, L'shana acheres. Why the next year? So the Chelik Badichva, and I think the Chidush Arim says the same thing, although a few generations, 2 generations later, 1 generation later. He says as follows, a Yom Tov by Yidden is not just commemorating a story of the past. Like the Arizal Taichas in the Megillah, Vayamim Ha'ela Niskarim V'Nasim. It's Niskarim, and through that V'Nasim. The same Oir, every Yom Tov that happened, there's a certain Oir, an energy that comes into the world on that Yom Tov. Even if the physical event doesn't repeat itself again, Yitzias Mitzrayim or Matan Torah or Purim or Chanukah, but the same energy that existed in the universe at the first Yom Tov repeats itself every year. So if it's a Yom Tov min HaTorah, there's no question. The Torah says to celebrate Pesach or Sukkot each year, granted. But with Chanukah, they didn't know. It was maybe a one-time miracle, a one-time nest that happened then. How do we know we should make it a Yom Tov? Stam from memory so we can eat latkes? That's not a Yom Tov by the Jewish people. It's a nice thing to have memories, but that's not what a Yom Tov is. L'shana haba, l'shana acheres, the next year came Chafei Kislev, and the Chazal felt the same energy that was there last year came around again, so now they made it a Yom Tov. So if it's a Yom Tov, it means every year it's the same occurrence, but the Yevonim are gone, and thank God we live in a democracy. We live in a thriving democracy, right? There's no lahashkicham teirasecha, there's no lavirim mechukri tzenecha. The Boston Tea Party, many, many years ago, allowed us to sit here tonight and learn Torah openly, b'reish glei, together with another hundreds or thousands of shirim all across America and the world. So it's not a memory, because the Melchame here against the Yevonim lahashkicham teirasecha, lavirim mechukri tzenecha is an internal one. It's an internal one based on 2 different types of experiences of Yiddishkeit. One is, I'm going to call it a Greek marriage with God, and one we'll call a Jewish marriage with God. And they're both within us. And in both there could be Torah and mitzvahs. But one is determined on lahashkicham teirasecha ulahavira mechukei ritzonecha. And that's the issue. And the Nes Chanukah was a victory over that. And that's not an external victory only. Of course it was an external victory. It's first and foremost an internal victory. Because all external victories begin with internal victories and must end with internal victories. The Chovos HaLevavos tells the story about this great melech who went out to war, and he was victorious, and he came back, and a chacham went out to greet him, and he said, welcome home from the small war, back to the great war. So he said, which great war? I'm done with the great war. The great war inside your own heart. What are these 2 versions of Yiddishkeit? What are these 2 versions of Yiddishkeit? One version of Yiddishkeit is, I serve Hashem, I believe in Hashem, I learn Torah, I steig in Torah, I do mitzvahs, mishpatim, and edus, and chukim, and I do it behidr. My hadassim have not Reb Chaim Noah's shir, but the larger shir. And my Chanukah menorah is mahadrim in a mahadrin, and my hadlakas menorah is mahadrim in a mahadrin, and I do everything, edus, chukim, and mishpatim, etc. So there's no lahashkicham teirasecha, there's no lavidim mechukei tzenecha l'cha'ira, but there's always a horse there. What do I mean? There's always a horse there. The Yevonim can accept Torah and edus and chukim and mishpatim, but it's always with a reason. What type of reason? It could be a great, great reason, including the reason that it's reasonable that you shouldn't understand the reason. That's also a reason. So you say, why am I a Yid? Why am I Torah and mitzvahs? Because I want shleimus. I want schar. I want schar in olam haza. I want schar in olam haba. In b'chukoisei telecha v'nasati geshmeichem b'itam. If I steig away in this world, I'm going to have olam haba in next world. The Levin beast of Saisav, the voice Bakeva, as Rabbi Yochanan said, that's a good reward. Even if I'm not thinking about that, but I want to become an Adam Gadol, I want to become an Adam Hashalem. How do we motivate people? How do we motivate our children? How do we motivate our Talmidim? How do we motivate young people today? Why should he get involved in Yiddishkeit? Why should he sit and learn? So there's always the promise. What's the benefit? Some type of logic. You'll have kavod. You'll become a gadol. You'll have shleimus. Maybe you'll be happy. You'll give nachas to your parents. You'll give nachas to your community. Maybe you'll be a big Rosh Yeshiva. You'll get a lot of olam haba. Even if none of those, you'll get a lot of olam haba. You'll be a bekavadika person. You'll feel good about yourself. This is all, it's all great. But this is still, there's a little Yevoni kivayachal that's lurking in the subway. Even if I say, you know what? I don't know why. But the Rebbeinu Shalom says to do it, it must make sense. There must be some shleimus in it. But not everything I do today, do I know why? Trust him. Trust your trainer, there's going to be a shleimus. But what am I looking for? Ultimately, I'm looking for the reason. Maybe I'm ready not to understand the reason today, but that's what I need. And then I can justify it to myself, whatever that reason may be. Comes Chanukah and says that this is the Yevoni. What's the emes? What's the emes in it? The emes is much deeper. Of course, there's a way of learning Torah and observing mitzvahs, always with an ulterior motive. Whatever that motive may be, sometimes I understand it well, sometimes I understand it a little bit, sometimes I don't understand it at all. But there's something much deeper. And that is what Chassidus always calls the dveikus haneshama shalamayla mitam v'das. What's the dveikus haneshama shalamayla mitam v'das? So since the Rambam in Hilchas Tshuva Perik Yud tells us the big yesod, that the relationship between Hashem and the Jew can always be understood as in Shir HaShirim, from the relationship between the Chassan and the Kala. The whole Shir HaShirim is a mashal for that. So let's use that. I think that's good as a metaphor. That's it. I think that's fine as a metaphor. If you have to give advice to somebody before they get married, so naturally, you'll give them advice and say, you know, when your wife asks you to do something, it's the proper thing to do it. It's the proper thing to do it. Okay, so the guy gets married and he has his manual, you know, from his teacher, his chassan classes or whatever, and his wife asks for the first request, or she intimates the first request. He says, wait. Ich verstehe nicht the seichel. I don't understand the seichel in it. So he goes back to his chassan teacher, and he says, you know, she likes this. I don't see the benefit of roses. I really don't see exactly what flowers can accomplish in a home. So he says, you have to understand that the woman's brain may work a little bit different than the man's brain. You don't have to understand, but if she understands, and this is what she wants, so even if you cannot put your brain around it, it's still appropriate to do it because this is for her, it makes sense. Okay, so the next time she asks him for something, he says, listen, I don't understand it, but since I'm sure you have a seichel behind it, you have a svara behind it, so maybe one day I'll finally be teifus how your brain works. In the meantime, I'll trust that there is some logic here, and I'll go ahead and do it. Okay, good. Listen, you could survive that way. But it's not a relationship. A relationship means it's really irrelevant if I understand it or not. It's really irrelevant if it fits in to the world of my logic or seichel, even by saying, I don't understand it today, I'll understand it tomorrow. I won't understand it tomorrow, I'll understand it in a year, but at least she understands it. It's irrelevant. The fact is, when you're connected to somebody, and this is what they want, so in your relationship, you do it with the same enthusiasm and the same excitement, even if you don't understand it, and even frankly, if from your perspective, there may be no logic to it, and maybe there's no logic. If this is what they genuinely want, you do it. If you're not ready for a relationship, then you need to understand. Why do you have to understand? Because you're still separate. Or to put it in different terms, if you're still looking for yourself, if you're still not confident and wholesome, so then you have to understand everything. Because if not, you feel, why am I doing it? I'm being used. But if you're internally wholesome enough and you're in a relationship with somebody, the very fact that they want this is sufficient. This is sufficient for you to do it, not because there's logic, not because you'll understand the logic, not because they understand the logic, but simply because they want. That should be enough if you have dveikus. And this is very important in the relationship. It's not, you probably have a seichel now. Okay, ich hab es nicht. I don't hab it. No. That's a much more diminished form of a relationship. The real concept of dveikus is, it's fine. This is what you want. That's what I celebrate. I'm celebrating the fact that you want it. This is the diuk in Alanissim. Lahaviram mechukei ritzoinecha. The Yevonim didn't mind that there's chukim. As long as you say, it's God's mind, but there has to be a horse somewhere. There has to be seichel somewhere. There has to be a psashleimus that I can capture. It makes sense for me. That's not dveikus. The emes inyan of Chanukah was that the neshama is a chelik elikam imal. A neshama celebrates elikus. A neshama celebrates godliness. Not because Elam Haza, not because Elam Haba. Yeah, that too. That's a byproduct. Not because it makes sense. Not even because it makes sense to God. He has his mathematical calculations. I'll figure it out one day. Even if I don't figure out one day, he's a great trainer. He knows what he's doing. He has his cheshbonos. That's still a mode of separateness, of complete separateness. That's not pshat real dveikus. Real oneness means I'm one with you, and I'm one with you, your will. Your will. If this is your will, the purity of my dveikus with you is one, that what's important to me is that it's your pristine will. In many ways, that's far more powerful to me than the logic. I'll tell you why. When your wife asks you something and it makes sense to you, so you go ahead and do it. So who are you doing it for? If it really makes sense, so then as much as you're doing it for your spouse, you're doing it for yourself also, because it makes sense. There's a shleimus in you. You don't sense the relationship here. What you sense here is you're worshiping yourself. It happens to be that by doing this, you'll benefit, but I see why. I see the benefit here. So if I see the benefit, I'm doing it for myself as much as I'm doing it for you. It's like you asked me to do a favor, which is enjoyable for you, but it's also enjoyable for me. Precisely when it's something actually that I don't understand. What's my motivation? And my motivation here is not that I get it. My motivation here is that it's your will. Here I'm given an opportunity to actually connect with you on your terms, not on my terms. Because on my terms, I would never do it. I don't get it. So it gives me an opportunity to transcend myself and to absolutely connect with you on your terms. That's what dveikus means. And this drove the Yevonim mad. For them, if you could classify God and put him into a picture of shleimus, that works. I need to have a picture of it that makes sense to me. But the pure, unadulterated, pristine intimacy of oneness, in which I'm ready to transcend myself simply to celebrate my relationship with you without whys, ifs, buts, whens, hows, because. To celebrate that dveikus of the Jew with Hashem as one, as being one, and therefore your will becomes my will. And I celebrate it because it's your will. And because it's your will, fulfilling your will is my natural state in which I want to be one with you. This they couldn't fathom. They never heard of such a thing. They never heard of such a thing. I can understand culture. I can understand values. I can understand ethics. I can understand your traditions. I can understand your philosophy, your perspectives. We can argue about it. Aher, we can argue about it ahin. But this is the pshat, the kedusha of Torah. The kedusha of mitzvahs. Lahashkicham Torah secha. Torah as a philosophy, gewaldig. Such seichel, such profundity, such interesting ideas. We can discuss it. We can make a comparative course of your Torah, of our Torah. We translate it into Targum Hashivim. Talmi HaMelech, the Gemara says, translated the Torah into Yevonis. Fine, beautiful. Why not? Such scholarship, such interesting ideas, interesting commandments. Gesundheit. Learn through Bavli, learn through Yerushalmi, learn through Tosefta, Medrash Rabbah, learn through Zoya, learn Rishonim, learn Acharayim. It's a world philosophy. It's a Weltanschauung. Master it. Adrabah. Become a great scholar. Become a Gadol Hador in scholarship and get it. That they didn't bother them. What bothered them was the Lahashkicham Torah Secho. Asedain Torah. Not that it's a great philosophy. The sense of the Kedusha Torah, that it's your Torah. The Elikus Sheba Torah. The Getlichkeit of Torah. The awe and the reverence of Torah that the Jew is learning in the experience a pure, wholesome relationship with Hashem, not for any ulterior motives, even physical or spiritual, or psychological or emotional, although those motivations are there and they come. But that's not the Nakuda of Torah. This they couldn't fathom. What's this about? For them, man is the center of existence, and only man, there's nothing beyond. And for Judaism, in Yiddishkeit, man's greatest self is experienced when he or she has the luxury and the freedom to transcend the self and to be able to connect and have dveikus and intimacy with something beyond. La'ashkicham torasecha u'lahaviram not mechukecha. Zol zayin chukecha, but chukei ritzaynecha, purely because it's your ratzon, because it's your desire. So somebody will ask, what does that mean, purely because what's your desire? I once gave a shir, I remember. It was a few years ago. I was teaching Tanya in Borough Park in Heichel Menachem on 46th. It was quite a few years ago, probably 15 years. Tavshin on Zion, so how many years ago was that? Like 18 years ago, yeah. I was teaching it as a bocher, and we learned the Tanya through in 6 years. 6 years. They made a series, a tale of two souls from the series of those classes. So we were learning Perik Yud. In Perik Yud, the Baal HaTanya writes that there's something called Bnei Aliyah. The Gemara says in Sukkah, Ra'isi Bnei Aliyah v'hein mu'atin. So he says a Bnei Aliyah is that their avodas Hashem is not for benefits of this world, not even Olam Haba, not even L'dofka bo yizbarech. It's not even because they want to connect. They want to connect. Rather, Ezo Chosid, Hamas Chasid, Im Koinoi, Im Kandele, Liyachada, Kutchabrichu, Shchine Betachtoinem. It's not even, I see something so awesome, I want to be your friend. That's also a motivation. I want to be Dovuk in you. I want to have a relationship with you. He says it's Liyachada, Kutchabrichu, Shchine Betachtoinem. That God's purpose, that's what's negeya to them, that God's will should be fulfilled. Not even that they should have dveikus. Forget Olam Haba. It's not even that they should have the relationship. I love just being with you. No. This even much higher. So I said a story. The story I said was that once, they say a ma'aseh about Reb Nachum Chernobyler. The Heilige Reb Nachum Chernobyler, the Mayan Yisroel, came to a city, and there was no mikveh. There was no mikveh. So he asked, why is there no mikveh? For women, there's no mikveh. So they said, because there's no money. So he said, nobody has money. They said there's one gvir, he has a lot of money, but he's very stingy. So Menachem goes to him, asks, no, as nishmas, doesn't want to give. So he gets up Shabbos by the bimah, he gets a clap, and he says, whoever gives money to build this mikveh, I'm giving him away my chelik in Olam Haba. Now, this wealthy man was stingy, but he was not stupid. And he understood that for 20,000 ruble, it's not a bad deal. So he raises his hand and he says, Amen. And they sign a contract, and he gives the money, and the mikveh is built, and Reb Nachum Chernobyler gave him away his chelik in Olam Haba. So I asked them, what's pshat in the mais? What's pshat in the mais? Don't you build mikvahs in order to get a chelik in Olam Haba? Don't you go to the mikveh in order to have Olam Haba? Isn't that what it says in so many places? It's all for Olam Haba. So if he's giving away his Olam Haba to build a mikveh, it's like, you know what I mean? Like Reuven told Yaakov, if I don't bring you Binyamin, you'll kill both of my kids. So Yaakov said, what am I going to gain? I'll kill my grandchildren. You're giving away Olam Haba to build a mikveh, which you do for Olam Haba. Right? You're pulling the rug out of your own feet. It's senseless. What's pshat? This is what I asked the shir. So somebody raised his hand and says, you don't understand. He knew that by doing this, he'll get even a bigger chelik in Olam Haba. By giving away his Olam Haba, he'll get a bigger chelik in Olam Haba. Of course it was for Olam Haba. So when he answered that, I understood the mashal that Chassidim used to say about the train. In other words, he could not liberate himself from that paradigm. There has to be a horse somewhere. He couldn't understand that Reb Nachum Chernobyl was a different Jew. They say about the Baal Shem Tov, a similar story. There was a couple that couldn't have children, and they asked him many times, and he said he can't, there's nothing he can do. And they begged and pleaded, and one day he gave them a haftacha, they're going to have a child, and after they left B'simcha, and they had their child. But after that, he heard a message, a baskel min hashamayim, that Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov just lost his chelik in Olam Haba. So he started to dance. So his daughter, Rebbe Adel, asked, "Was tanzt, Tate? Why are you dancing?" So he says, till now he wasn't sure if he's serving Hashem, al manas lekabel prasa shaloi al manas lekabel. He wasn't sure how selfish it is. Now, Baruch Hashem, he knows he has no headaches. Now he can just serve God without any issues. Without any issues. Right. So it's very hard for us to understand. What does this mean? What do you mean? Of course, I want the schar, I want the reward. There has to be an I somewhere. There has to be an I somewhere. But the truth is that in the depth of a Jew, this is the end of the Maisa, that they told the Baal Shem Tov that for that dance, he got back his Olam Haba. So he got upset again. However you want to understand it, the point is, there has to be an I somewhere. There has to be a horse somewhere. Of course there has to be an I somewhere. Because if there's no I somewhere, what's here? But the emes is that the depth of the soul of a Jew, his I and Hashem's I are really one. That's the nekuda. The nekuda of a Jew is that there's a dveikus l'mayla mitam v'das. Is that core place, what we've spoken in other weeks about the chelik eloikami mal mamish, that there's a real core place where there's complete oneness. And because there's complete oneness, so you don't have to find my I in the process, not because I'm insecure or I'm timid or I'm afraid or I'm abused. On the contrary. Because there's a dveikus here that is at the core of his self. So the greatest thing about Yiddishkeit is that it's Torah Secha, that it's Lahavira Mechukei Ritzaynecha. And all this, Chazal expressed in that halacha. Kafsa ein zakukla. Because what does kafsa ein zakukla mean? The kindling itself is the purpose. You would think, I kindle the flame, and I want the flame to burn. The light that's generated from the flame. The chiddush of Chanukah is kafsa ein zakukla lahalacha. The very fact that he kindled it, that itself is the accomplishment of the mitzvah. L'cha'oira, why not have him rekindle it? But this expresses the nekuda of Chanukah. That the nekuda of Chanukah is the kindling of which flame? The kindling of the Neir Hashem Nishmas Adam, of the Oir Haganuz, which celebrates Ritzoynecha as the deepest reality, and celebrates Torah Secha as the deepest reality. So even though every mitzvah and every shtickle Torah has tremendous benefits, but the very act of lighting it, the very act of the kindling this light, the light of Torah, the light of mitzvahs, you say, but it's not burning. It's not enduring. What's the benefit you're getting from the light? That's not the nekuda of Chanukah. So Mele kofsa ein zakukla. Asur lehishtamesh la'oida. What says asur lehishtamesh la'oida? The same nekuda. Asur lehishtamesh la'oida is, I'm not benefiting from it. So the Yevonim said, what's the point? Light up, but tishtamesh. Later in Gemara it says, asur lahartzis moyes b'fnei ner Chanukah. You're not allowed to count money before ner Chanukah. Why does the Gemara chap money? Why money dafka? You say, don't read. Why money? So the Rambam says in the beginning of Hilchas Chanukah, what happened? The Yevonim pashtu yadam b'mamoinam u'bibnei sehem. Two things. The Yevonim were after Jewish money and Jewish women, their daughters. So now you could think, what's the celebration of Chanukah? Money. Our monies are in the bank. So you'll count money in front of Ner Chanukah. Asur lahartzis mois b'fnei ner Chanukah is not just a physical mashal. You could use a lot of mashalim. You would say the whole ner Chanukah is the fact that we have our money. Because pashtu yadam b'mamayim b'mnaisem, we got rid of the Yavanim, we have our money. So ner Chanukah, was liegt in them? Was liegt in them is a celebration of my money. That's what's there. So the Gemara says, Asur lahartzis mois b'fnei ner Chanukah, to show it's not to celebrate. Yeah, of course they had money. Great. Everybody should have money. They should have a lot of money. But Asur lahartzis mois b'fnei ner Chanukah, was liegt in them is nicht the Geld. They say the Panovich Rav was once at a dinner, so there were a lot of speakers. So all the speakers said, they speak, if you ever had the misfortune to be at dinners, you know what happens. Today's video is Baruch Hashem, so it's a little shorter. But used to be Mamash Drashas Malayas. So they put him up at the end. So he gets up and he says, Alle redne bis jetzt haben geredet wegen Teure. Sie haben geredet wegen Teure. Aber was haben sie gemeint? Sie haben gemeint Geld. Ich gehe reden wegen Geld. Aber was meine ich? Ich meine Teure. All the speakers till now spoke about Teure, but what did they mean? They only meant money. I'm going to speak about money, but you should know what's my intention. My intention is Teure. So the nekuda is that sometimes in the deepest flames, in the deepest decidedness, in the deepest lights, right? There's the inner Yavani that's looking, that's always saying, this is the motivation, this is it. Doesn't allow you to feel, doesn't allow you to focus, doesn't allow you to experience the Tara, the Kedusha, the pure, undiluted purity of Yiddishkeit. Comes Abaya. Abaya, the Gemara says in Kiddushin, was a Yasim, a round Yasim. His father died before he was born. His mother died after he was born. He was raised by his uncle, by Rabbi Bar Nachmani. In fact, why is he called Abaya? So there's a few opinions. One opinion is because his name was Nachmani. Rabbi didn't want to call him by Nachmani because that was his own father's name, Rabbi Bar Nachmani. So he called him Abaya, like Avi. He has the name of my father. Abaya is my father. But it's also brought in Svarim. Abaya is a Rosh Tevis, Asher Becha Yerucham Yasam. Hosea Hanavi says, in you, Hashem, an orphan will find love. Because he's Avi Yisraimim. A child needs parents, psychologically, emotionally, physically, spiritually. There's something we all need to get from our fathers. There's something we need to get from our mothers. We spoke in previous weeks that Yitzchak could love because he was loved. A person needs parents. That's how God made us. Adam and Chava didn't have parents, and the consequences were clear. A person needs parents. A Yasim, it's not his fault, doesn't have parents, or doesn't have a parent. Abaya didn't have parents. So the Navi says, Asher Becha Yerucham Yasim. The Yasim's avoid, and it's not an easy avoid, is he has to find that love in God. Asher Becha, in you, Yerucham Yasim. The Yasim has to find Rachmanis, love, compassion. That's Abaya. Asher Becha Yerucham Yasim. And it's brought in Svarim, and Lakuti Levi Yitzchak says, the Gemara in Brachas, Daf Mem Vav, or Mem Ches, Daf Mem Ches, that when Abaya and Rava were children, they were playing together by Rabbi. So it came the time to bench. So the Gemara discusses over there if you could be Metzara for cotton, for Zimun, if you're Ideya Lemim Avarach, any Ideya. So he asked Rava, if you know to who we bench. He said, yeah, Rachmana, to Hashem. He says, Abaya? Yeah, to Hashem. So he asks Rava, where is God? So Rava points to the Koira, to the beams in the ceiling. So then he asks Abaya, where's Hashem? So Abaya takes his uncle outside and he points to the heavens. So Rabbi said then, Butzen, Mekatva Yediyah. From a young children, still when they're very young, you could see what's coming. What's the diuk that Rava pointed to the ceiling and Abaya pointed to the heavens? So it's brought in Sifrei Kabbalah, Mekuta Levi Yitzchak. Abaya, it's known as Makif HaKarev and Makif HaRochek. There's a Makif, that which is above you, but it still has close proximity. That's like the ceiling, Abayas. And then there's the heavens, which is also a Makif, like a home, but it's a Makif HaRochek. It's completely remote. So Rava had a relationship with Makif HaKarev, and Abaya had a relationship with Makif HaRochek. One of the explanations, I think, is because Abaya was an orphan. Our orphan doesn't have a Makif HaKarev. He doesn't have the shelter, the nurture of a home. He has to find solace. He has to find confidence. He has to find wholesomeness in Makif Harachik, in Hashem. What's haste in Hashem? In a relationship with Hashem, like with a father and a mother. What's a real relationship with a father and a mother? Unconditional. It's not, I love my child because I'm going to get schar. I love my father and mother because I'm going to get olam haba. Real dveikus is it's etzem. It's the same etzem. It's essence. Parents and children have to celebrate each other for their essence, not because, there's a mitzvah v'shinant, there's a mitzvah she'era ksusa v'inasa lo yigra. So if I'm going to give money to my child, I'm going to get olam haba. If that's the whole relationship to the child, it's not the best relationship. It's not a relationship. It's always the horse is always there. You know, where am I? Where am I? Where am I? There's no experience of losing yourself in intimacy. Abaye didn't have that home. Abaye had to find it in Makif Harachik. So when they told Abaye, Kofsa ein Zakukla, he didn't accept it. In the name of Rabbi Yochanan, he accepted it. So later he said, if I would have had a schus, I would have known this idea when I was young. So he says, B'shum girsa de yankasa, because of the learning of the youth. Children are capable of real purity. Children are capable of real dveikus because they're trusting, they're unencumbered or obstructed by ego, by other motivations. Children have a purity. As the Medrash says, why do we start learning Sefer Vayikra with children? Yavoyu tahirim v'yisasku b'tahirim. Let the pure ones come and zich oisik b'tahir. The nekud of kofsa ein zakuk is asur l'shtamish la'oira. It's the same nekud. It's the taras ha'toira. It's the gedushas ha'toira. It's the purity of Torah. Purity for the sake of purity. And that Girsa de Yankasa, that's the etzem story of Chanukah. The Lahaydus Alahala L'Shimcha HaGadol. To remove all the side nekudas and to connect to that nekuda of Yiddishkeit, that there should be Torah Secha and Chukir Etzeinecha. That's the miracle of Chanukah every year. Afreilach Yom Tov.